Anthony Castrovince joining us now, reporter and columnist for MLB.com. So we got a couple weeks to go until October. Thanks for being with me to kind of break down what we should expect in the playoffs. I guess just to start, what excites you most in this time of year, right on the cusp of October baseball?
Well, I love that we're never settled. Like we always think we are. Things look pretty standard going into September. We have a pretty good idea of who's going to be in the race, who's not, but then things get totally upended. I'm thinking when I say that of the way the Blue Jays have performed this month and really storming their way towards a wild card spot. And the Cardinals, you look at the NL playoff picture and how much has changed just in the last month. And the way, the Reds and Padres and other teams have kind of fallen back, and it's the Cardinals with that old Cardinal magic making a surge. So I love that things are never quite settled until they are, and in all likelihood, we'll have something come down to the final day. It always seems to be that way.
It seems like the wild card picture in both leagues is, for lack of a better word, pretty wild. And when you look at the AL East, they're pretty loaded. Who do you think is left on the outside in terms of that race?
It changes by the day. My opinion changes by the day because, like everyone else, I get caught up and swept up in the emotion of whatever happened the night before. But I will say, it's impossible not to love the way the Blue Jays are playing, and that'll be a tough matchup for either the Yankees or Red Sox, whoever it happens to be. The Yankees have had a really uneven year. I know the Red Sox have as well, but they were kind of always expected to have an uneven year. The Yankees were supposed to be a juggernaut and has not exactly proven true. So it wouldn't shock me if the Yankees, get left behind with the bullpen issues they have and the inconsistency of their offense. If they end up on the outside looking in, that's not something we would have predicted at the beginning of the year, but that could very well be the case.
When you look at the entire league, are the Yankees the team that have the most at stake, in your opinion, based on, what you just mentioned?
Well, everything's always bigger in the Bronx. We know that. Taking a long range frame of mind, perhaps not, because we know the Yankees will always find a way to be. They haven't had a losing season, since the early '90s. So they'll always find a way to be competitive, and I suspect that they'll be fairly aggressive in this upcoming free agent class. So there's always a way for them to kind of right the ship, I guess. But to your point, just because it is the Bronx, because of the Yankees, because the expectations are so high, this is a long way from where they expected to be. And that leads to a lot of angst and perhaps a lot of change.
How does what happens over the next couple of weeks ultimately impact Cashman and the decision that they make? You mentioned free agency and everything that's at stake, and it's changing kind of by the day. But, if they ultimately do fall short, how much more aggressive do you expect them to be? A winning season is a winning season, but with a storied franchise like that, I imagine that's, getting pretty old at this point.
Yeah, we're all kind of wondering that. Brian Cashman and Aaron Boone are very much aligned in their thinking. And, a failure like this is not just about the manager. It's about the way the club was constructed to begin with. I think Brian Cashman knows that and acknowledges that. But sometimes decisions are made, above even someone as influential as Brian Cashman. So I don't know if they would make a change at manager. I don't suspect a change at general manager, but clearly the way, they were the way the lineup was arranged is very boom or bust. Obviously very right-handed until the trade deadline. So it'll be interesting to see if they do make really substantial changes to the complexion of the player pool, or if a change is made in the dugout, or if it's just a matter of, hey, we're gonna go spend on one of the top shortstops in free agency. There's a lot of good ones in this class to be had, and perhaps some help in the rotation beyond Garrett Cole. That would probably be the most likely outcome, but. Again, when it's this long of a wait for a Yankees team to even get to the World Series, let alone win one, at some point, you expect some major aggression there.
Just heading all the way over to the other side of the country, you look at the NL West and what the Giants and the Dodgers have done. You being such a student of the league, to what do you specifically attribute what we've seen from both of those teams this season?
To me, it really comes down to depth. And for the Dodgers, that was obvious. They've been a great team for a long time. And they do that by accruing depth on top of depth. And sometimes they make a move and people say, well, where are you going to put this guy? Or is that too many starters? And it never is, because things happen. We've seen that with the Dodgers this year. Their rotation looks a lot different than it did at the beginning of the year. And you would not have expected for them to have a need for a Max Scherzer. You can always use a Max Scherzer, but it was not exactly a pronounced need going into the season for the rotation. But sure enough, by the time the trade deadline arrived, that was a legitimate need for them. But they always do that. They always get depth on top of depth. What's surprising is how well the Giants have done it at getting that complexion as well. They've done it by acquiring a lot of undervalued talent. Farhan Zaidi, in a very short time there, has really remade that organization at the big league level in terms of the amount of depth that they have at their disposal. They use their bench so well. And so in some ways, they've kind of taken on the look of the Dodgers in recent years. They don't have quite as much, major star power. And some of their success is, of course, attributed to Buster Posey turning back the clock and Brandon Crawford, having a monster power year, a power surge. Brandon Belt's having a great year prior to free agency. But a lot of it, too, is just the depth of options they have on their bench and getting some unexpectedly great performances from different guys and utilizing their pitching so well, mixing and matching, not unlike the Tampa Bay Rays in that regard. So it's really been a fascinating team, and nobody expected that it would be the Giants and not the Padres to challenge the Dodgers here in 2021. But lo and behold, the Giants have had one of the best seasons in franchise history, which is pretty incredible.
Forgive me if I'm wrong. I don't think that they play again before the regular season ends. So when you look at, who has a chance to ultimately win out, who do you give the edge to between those two teams?
Well, the Giants have the mathematical edge, and you're right, they don't play each other. And the Giants, to their credit, played the Dodgers so well head on this year, and they won that last series against each other at the beginning of September. I've always leaned towards the Dodgers winning the division because I do feel like they ultimately have the best talent, and Max Scherzer has been a huge difference maker for them. That's immediately in the pantheon of greatest trade deadline acquisitions of all time, the way he's performed for them. So I'll just stick with that until it doesn't happen. And it might not happen. Maybe the Giants continue to fend them off down the stretch. But I can't bet against that Dodgers team ultimately coming on top.
I know a lot of the conversation at this time of year is around awards, Cy Young, MVP, Rookie of the Year, all that stuff. Do you have clear-cut names in your mind that you feel like are deserving of those awards based on what you've seen? Or are there, which races, I guess, for those postseason awards are a little bit cloudier in your mind?
NL Cy Young is still pretty complex and a lot of fun. Corbin Burns has a great argument. His teammate Brandon Woodruff is in that mix. Zach Wheeler of the Phillies is in that mix. Max Scherzer himself is in that mix. So that's one that's very likely to come just down to the wire, and who performs best in their last couple starts is going to be a big difference maker. You could say the same about the AL Cy Young, but I feel like Robbie Ray has kind of pulled away there a bit. Garrett Cole, as we record this, in his last outing got lit up by Cleveland, and that skews the numbers there in Robbie Ray's in his favor. So. The one that's just probably the hottest debate right now, and people bickering back and forth on Twitter, is just this American League MVP. To me, it's obvious that Shohei Ohtani is the MVP. He's had not just a historic season, but an unprecedented season to have. It's the definition of valuable, where you got two players in one. And he's been so fantastic in both elements, both the pitching and the hitting. It's unheard of. So to me, he's the clear MVP. But obviously, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has made a really strong push in the second half. He's had a monster year in general. He's vying for the Triple Crown, and you get into that debate of if a guy wins the Triple Crown, should it be the automatic MVP? Should the MVP come from a playoff team? Is it okay for a guy on a 70-something win Angels team to win MVP again, as we saw with Mike Trout a couple years back? I think where I stand on that one, but it is fun to see that debated back and forth.
You know the nuances of the game so much better than I do. I know Shohei Ohtani is going to be drawing those comparisons to Babe Ruth for such a long time, two-way player, all that sort of thing. I mean, are those comparisons fair? Should those comparisons be drawn? Is it like other sports where, it's a completely different era, completely different set of circumstances? Or, has he proven this year that he is that sort of transcendent player that is deserving of that long time recognition?
I would say those comparisons are unfair, and they're unfair to Ohtani, and I say that with obvious respect for Babe Ruth. But, Babe Ruth only did this pitching and hitting for a couple years, and then he went full time to being a position player, and it was a much different era. It was much different competition. The game was not racially integrated. The style of the game was so much different. And he never had a season like Ohtani has had in terms of we can compare eras when you look at how a guy does relative to his league peers. And Babe Ruth did not have a season like Shohei Ohtani where, this clearly this good at both pitching and hitting, this better than the league average in both. That's why when you factor in the competition level and what is required of major league players today, it's a 162 game season. It's the greatest competition in the world. It is integrated. It's culturally diverse, globally diverse. These are the best athletes baseball has to offer. And it's just unheard of what he's doing to, I know he's done pitching now, but to pitch about once a week and to pitch at the level he did and to hit on an everyday basis and vie for the home run title, it's magical. I think about all the pitchers I've covered over the years and just the preparation that goes into being able to post up, 20 to 30 times in a season. He'll finish about 20 starts. That's an intense physical load and mental load. And oh, by the way, he's gone out and hit 40 something home runs. So it's mind blowing.
I love the word magical. It completely defies logic. Before we let you go, and we appreciate the time, just maybe last kind of storyline that's a little bit on the fringe, that's outside of the who's going to win the wild card, who's the favorite in the playoffs sort of a thing. I mean, is there a team that's tracking or trending to do something that you feel like isn't getting the attention that it deserves?
Well, I will say that the Cardinals always do this, right? They sneak their way into October, and then, some guy you've never heard of goes crazy for a week and they knock out some 100-win team. At this point, you just shrug your shoulders and assume that's going to happen because, I live in Cleveland and the Cardinals were here in town just before the trade deadline. And they were playing pretty well. They'd won like 7 out of 10, and they weren't expected to do much at the trade deadline. And, they didn't do much of the trade deadline that in terms of really firing up the fan base or the clubhouse. They acquired Jay Happ and John Lester, and everyone kind of said, oh, well, whatever. Well, lo and behold, 5-6 weeks later, there they are, not just in the mathematical mix, but leading the charge in part because of the way those other teams have fallen off. But you're getting those 2011 Cardinals vibes where what business does this team have doing, getting into October and then strange things happen. So I'll just assume that's what's going to happen.
All right. Anthony Castrovince, MLB.com writer, contributor. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate the time.